Hello, welcome to the Learning Laboratory. My name is Renate Stauss and I'm a Professor of Fashion Studies in the Department of Global Communications, and I've been asked to talk about fashion in times of COVID-19. So the pandemic has changed what we wear, it's changed how we shop, it's changed the fashion industry, but I think most importantly, COVID-19 has slowed down fashion. So in a sinister way, the virus has achieved what many inside and outside the industry have been trying to do for years, to decelerate what has become hyper-fast fashion and to interrupt the enormous overproduction of fashion. And that's both for luxury, but also for the mass market. We've just come out of Fashion Revolution Week, which again highlighted the human exploitation of the fashion industry, but also its environmental impact. So just to give you an example, the global per capita textile production has more than doubled in the past 40 years, making the fashion industry the second largest consumer of water, but also the second largest industrial polluter, producing 92 million tons of textile waste every year. So COVID-19 has slowed down fashion. But this deceleration comes at a huge cost, a human cost, a social cost, and an economic cost. But it also carries some benefits, and not just for the environment. So on the basis of 3 face masks, which have become the symbol of our times, I want to briefly reflect on some of the impacts that COVID-19 has had on fashion so far, but also in turn show some of the richness and complexities of fashion itself. So what fashion is, but also what fashion could be. The first mask is a Chanel mask worn by a visitor to Paris Fashion Week at the end of February. It stands for the most visible in fashion, its economic paradigm, its business. So in its place, I could have also used a Fendi mask, selling currently for $200, or an Off-White mask, reselling for up to $400. Fashion has been called the favorite child of capitalism. I don't think it's as innocent as that, but the correlation is clear. So before COVID, the fashion business was thriving. It was estimated at $2.4 trillion in 2018, employing up to 300 million people worldwide, and even 1 in 6 people globally if the textile production is included. So between mass and luxury, it's a highly complex industry. And COVID-19 is said to have brought this industry to its knees. But I think it's really important to remember that the different market levels and, most importantly, the different professionals were affected very differently. So collections and fashion weeks have been cancelled. London Fashion Week is now going digital for the first time. Shops are still shut. The supply chains are interrupted. Millions of unsold garments are piling up. Insolvencies are mounting, so speculation about acquisitions. But the Workers' Rights Consortium, the WRC, estimates that £20 billion worth of orders have been cancelled by brands worldwide, leaving millions of workers without a social safety net. The externalization of much of the fashion industry from the global West to the global Southeast, since the 1980s especially, has created deep global hierarchies and shifted the economic burden away from brands towards millions of garment workers who are now the most vulnerable and, in this crisis, the most affected. The story of COVID-19 and fashion is told as a story about industry disruption by much of the fashion media, an industry in crisis. And of course, this is understandable, considering that sales across the fashion business are estimated to decline by up to $600 billion worldwide. But by reducing this crisis to its economic impact, the human impact gets lost. And I think generally fashion is mediated in quite reductive ways as a constantly shifting series of fashionable style-building products. But the many processes that go into such products, all its ingredients, its full journey and cost, the hundreds of hands that shape it, often go unrecognized and even unrecorded. Ursula de Castro, the co-founder of Fashion Revolution, commented last week, "One big realization from the coronavirus is that our system and society places profit way above people. And I don't think it's ever looked as outrageous as now." So COVID-19 brings to light not only the global dimensions of the fashion industry, but also its inequalities and its fragility. So rather than an industry disruption or a supply chain shock, COVID-19 is a humanitarian crisis on a global scale, also in fashion. The second mask takes us to Italy, to Pesaro, a small city on the Adriatic coast. It's an FFP2 mask worn by a nurse at San Salvatore Hospital. The photographer Alberto Giuliani documented the work of medical staff there for The Atlantic by showing the deep imprints that the corona crisis has left on them, both physically and emotionally. To me, this is one of the most evocative images of the past 2 months. Masks have become a highly symbolic global garment, but their meaning isn't universal. It can range from fear to misinformation, from social distancing to considerateness. Masks make the invisible visible. They make COVID-19 tangible. But masks can also symbolize how fashion and its mundane version, dress, can tell stories about us and how it connects us. So whatever we put on our bodies, our dress is a connective tissue, and fashion is a global cultural phenomenon. At first, medical masks and fashion seem to be far removed, but at the moment they're even being produced in luxury fashion houses. So Armani, Chanel, Yves Saint Laurent, Balenciaga, Burberry, they've all converted what is left of their production in Italy, France, and the UK, what hasn't been externalized, to produce face masks. So COVID-19 hasn't only changed the fashion industry, it's also changed what we're wearing. Face masks are fast becoming a fashion item and a business opportunity for the fashion industry, but also a creative opportunity for all of us. The third mask I want to show you was designed by textile student Fabienne Racker and was published alongside the full-scale pattern and sewing instructions in the largest German newspaper. To me, it stands for the creative potential that COVID-19 might offer fashion. So in its place, I could have shown one of the hundreds of online tutorials on mask making, or one of the thousands of homemade masks that are currently being posted from all over the world. So they show how COVID-19 has changed what we're wearing, but I think most importantly, it shows the creative potential. So how we take ownership of what we're wearing and consider what we have in our wardrobes and what we can make with that rather than what we need to buy next. Much is being said about the future of fashion right now. For instance, the Dutch trend forecaster Lee Edelkoort says that the pandemic is an amazing grace for the planet, which offers a blank page for new beginning. But I don't think we have a blank page, but a broken system to start from. Or the business of fashion, they predict a Darwinian fallout of the fashion industry. They write, the crisis will shake out the weak, embolden the strong, and accelerate the decline of companies that were already struggling before the pandemic. But what do they mean by the strongest? Is it the ones with the biggest turnover, or the largest margins, or the most externalized? I think history has shown us that it's not the heaviest dinosaurs who will survive, but the most agile, flexible, and the most creative. At the end of March, the French philosopher Bruno Latour posted a little exercise to make sure that after the virus crisis, things don't start again as they were before. And I think some of the 6 questions that he poses there can help us think through fashion. They can help us to determine what it is that we want to keep in fashion and what it is that we want to change, but also what measures could be taken to ensure that the workers and entrepreneurs who can no longer be able to engage in the activities that we are removing will be helped towards their transition to other activities. Ursula de Castro of Fashion Revolution commented last week that the pandemic has shown us that we can stop. Because up until 2 months ago, we didn't think we could. So as consumers of fashion, we have some influence over how COVID-19 will continue to impact fashion. Through our consumer choices, we can help rebuild a more sustainable industry. But I think most importantly, we can keep the knowledge that we're makers of fashion and not just consumers, that it is us who fashion ourselves and not the fashion industry, that we are not passive consumers, but active makers, and not just of face masks.